Hello everyone, welcome back to another video of Metronic. In this video, we'll be discussing on how you can customize the Gulp build for Metronic 7 and above. So let's get right into it. So of course, you need to purchase Metronic, and once you've purchased Metronic, you've unzipped it, it should look something like this. And in here, you just click on just enter your theme, go to your HTML, and then go into your tools. In your tools, this video will be talking about Gulp. Next video will be talking about Webpack, so stay tuned for that. So for Gulp, what we'll be looking at mostly will be this file right here. So open that up in your IDE. So you go to Tools, let's go to Gulp config, and this is where you can customize Metronic's Metronic 7's deployment. Well, not really deployments, like what assets would you like to build and be compiled and bundled up and then gets pushed as assets for your project. So what do you mean by push as assets for your project? So if you look into our demo, like any demo, in our source, we have all our Sass, JS, media files, plugins, and whatnot. All these files will basically get compiled, bundled up, minified, and then gets deployed or rendered into this assets folder. So this is what we mean by getting pushed into assets. So all this are already pre-configured. It basically compiled Sass into CSS as bundles, and then JS also bundled up as this. So here we have scripts, and each page will have its own bundle. So each page will have, like, say in a calendar, you have some background and Google and whatnot. Base, you have these other things. So in this video, we'll be discussing on where does all these assets come from and how you can actually configure and customize your build so that you do not need to include all of these plugins for your project. Because of course, since Metronic is a large demo, your project doesn't necessarily need all these files. So first thing we need to look at is the main configuration. Let's call this the root configuration. The root configuration basically says the name, the theme, the description of it, and the current version. So in this version, we are on version 7. So in our configuration, we have a false debug. What this does, if you turn it on to true, is when you run a Gulp, Gulp-dash the demo name, you basically get more information when you're building it. And then this is what we are defining to skip if we are building a RTL version. So at the moment, RTL is set to false. So whenever you run the Gulp build, nothing happens. Like, you do not build a RTL version. If you want an RTL version, you can just change this to true, and then you will build the RTL version of it. Now, what RTL means is right to left. It just swaps the Metronic layout. So let's have a look in our layout. So let's just have a look here. So at the moment, everything's reading from left to right. Basically, you're reading this way. So what RTL means is it'll be swapped the other way. So you'll be starting reading from right to left. It's good for certain languages like Arabic. So yeah, if you need it, you just turn that on. If you don't, just leave it as false. Now, if you turn it on, what we're doing here is we are selecting certain plugins to be skipped or not included within the RTL. The reason why we don't include any one of these plugins into RTL is simply because there's absolutely no reason to do that. For example, icons. If you read it right to left, regardless what icon you're looking at, an icon will still look like an icon, whether it's left to right or right to left. So this is all the plugins that we are skipping in a right to left RTL version. Of course, what you can do is if you want to add more, you just type comma and then type your plugin name, like so. And all this is additional settings if you want to turn on JS Uglify, or if you want to CSS minify and you want to turn on like JS source maps or CSS source maps. This is all the configuration you can use. You can turn it on and off. It's set to false by default. And this is our path. So our path is basically a set of paths of where you're getting. The first one will be where we're getting the source. So the source is set to a specific demo and then source. So if you're looking at demo 1, this would be demo 1 source. And what demo 1 source is, we go to demo 1, this folder. So everything in here gets pulled into this Gulp build. And node modules is your node modules. You're just defining where your node modules is sitting. If your node modules is sitting somewhere else, what you do is you just change this path to where your node modules is located. Demo API URL, you do not need to worry so much about this. This is mainly for certain tools or certain plugins or certain functions or demo or widgets components within Metronic that uses API callbacks. Like some of our data tables requires APIs, like maybe an API data table like let's have a look here. So if you go to data table, we have some data sources that we can do a server-side AJAX call. So this is an example of an API callback. So what it does is it uses this URL to get the data. Again, this is only for the demo. If you are using the API server-side example for your project, you actually do not need to do this. All you need to do is you need to customize the JS file to pull it from your proper backend server. We'll discuss that on the later video when we show you how you can customize certain things within Metronic. And then this field here, or this node here, is another important one. Is what this is essentially where you want to deploy your assets once it's compiled. That means once you get all these two things, it minifies and bundles everything together, and then you want to build the asset folder. Now, where do you want to put it? So this is the path of where you want to place it. So it by default is placing within each demo. So a demo will have a this and will have assets. So if you're demo 1, 2, 3, or so on and so forth, it'll be the demo number and then this and an asset. So that is where all the assets sit. However, if your project is sitting on another folder and it's not within a demo, so what you do is, let's say you customize certain things here, like say you don't want form validation, for example. You can just remove that plugin, run the Gulp command, and then change this to your project folder, and then all the assets will then be deployed to your project. We can show you a quick demo on how that works shortly. But let's look into what else we have here. So in our build field or build parameter here, we have two things. We have main, vendor, a few things, and pages, and theme and media. So in main, what we're doing is we're just defining which SAS file we'll be grabbing, or where the style.sas is located, and where all the scripts are located, like what are we grabbing, like all the JS from components, all the JS from layouts. And then what we're doing is we are bundling all this, which is just a single SAS at the moment, but of course if you want to extend this you can. We're bundling this into style.bundle.css. So essentially, let's look at demo 1. Let's go to source. Oops, that's not that. Source, SAS, and then style. We're bundling this. You see what this is importing all of init, our Bootstrap, and all of our components, and all that. So what we're doing is we're importing all this into our single style.sas, and then what we're doing is we're bundling all this into our CSS bundle, which is within the assets CSS style bundle. So all this whole entire thing, basically. And this is the same concept with our scripts. So if you look into our source, JS components of everything in here, because we are taking everything, like all the asterisk represents everything. And from our layout, everything in here as well, everything. And bundling it into our scripts bundle. So if you minimize this, you open JS, this file right here, all this gets bundled from this too. JS files. So this is essentially how you read it. So there's a certain formula to it, or a certain template of how this works. Every source will have either a styles or scripts, and then a bundle. Basically, you have source and bundle. So source will have the styles and scripts are where the main source styles and scripts are located. And then in the bundle field, what you're doing is you're defining where all these files are getting bundled and deployed to. Okay, so that's that for our main. You don't really need to do any changes here because this is what we are defining for Metronic to work. If you remove like one of this or remove one of this, there's a pretty high chance that Metronic will stop working. So if you want to modify any of this, then we highly recommend that you know what you're doing so that you can customize this yourself. But if you don't, we highly recommend you to not change anything from the main. Okay, so now comes the vendors. So vendors are Metronic's third-party plugins. Now, our vendors, we have a few things. We have base and custom. So in base, we have mandatory plugins and optional plugins. So mandatory plugins is like jQuery, Popper, Bootstrap, Moment, and all this. All these are mandatory plugins that is used constantly or very frequent within all of Metronic's components and pages. So we highly recommend for you to not change anything here unless you know what you're doing. However, you are free to add more if you want. But if you want to add more, again, you don't have to put it in here. You can put it under, let's minimize this, optional. So optional plugins are, well, it's pretty self-descriptive. It is optional plugins that may or may not be used within Metronic in certain pages or not. For example, like a Bootstrap date picker. A Bootstrap date picker may not be used in certain pages in Metronic. It may be used in our form demo pages, but it might not be used in, say, an error page sample. So an error page would not have Bootstrap date picker, so we don't need this in our main global function. So all these are optional for you to remove. So in your project, let's say you're building a project and your project does not need so many pickers. Like, yes, you maybe need a date picker, but you don't need a date time picker, you don't need a time picker, you don't need date range picker. So what happens here is what you can do is you just select all this and delete. And it disappears completely from your project assets the moment you run the Gulp command. So if you want to add your own, there's two ways to add. The first way you can add is by using the npm package manager by just typing in npm or yarn add, basically npm install or yarn to add, and then the plugin name. And then you install into your node modules, and what you do is you copy this. This is the path to your node modules, and then this is your plugin that you just installed. So what you do is you put all the way at the bottom, just before the bundle, like after this, put a comma, and then you define your new plugin. Let's call it new plugin, for example. And then say your plugin has styles, like certain CSS that needs to be included. And then you put your, let's say like this. New plugin, say it's something like that. And then if you have scripts, put your scripts here. Whoops. And then let's put this, remove all that. Plugin.js. So that's it. So what you're doing here is you're just including your new plugin into your build. Okay, so let's minimize this optional and let's have a look at what's happening here. So everything within the mandatory and optional will get bundled up into plugins.bundle.css for all styles and plugin.bundle.js for all scripts. So if we look into our assets, see our scripts, and then we see, you go to plugins, and then we go to global, you see that, these two. See these two? So all this will be added into these two files. So as mentioned, if you do not need certain things, all you have to do is just delete them. And then it gets bundled into these files, these two bundled files with less code because you just remove them. Alright, so those are global plugins. So all these plugins are included globally. These are global plugins that every page will be including these two files. Then comes page-specific bundles. Page-specific bundles are basically our custom. So we have base and we have custom. So if you look into our custom, here, assets, custom, yep. No, here. So we have all these plugins that are, we call it, it's still third-party plugins, but they are considered customs simply because they are very large plugins and we do not want to bloat our global plugins. So we will call any one of these plugins as and when we are using them within a page in Metronic. For example, TinyMCE. TinyMCE is a WYSIWYG editor that we only use for a single page within the whole of Metronic. So if we look in our demo and we go to where is our forms and then form text editors, and then as you can see, TinyMCE is only listed here or shown here, and that's it. So what we do is, if you view source, or if you don't have to view source, we can look at this HTML. So let's look at that. So let's go and find it's in CRUD form editors and tiny. There you go. So scroll all the way to the bottom. As you can see, we are including our plugins bundle and then any additional bundles. These are okay. Our plugins, our scripts, and Prism. This is a custom plugin that we are inserting globally. But we are also putting our page vendor plugins like a TinyMCE bundle. And this is a script that we are using for ourselves to initialize TinyMCE. So going back here, plugins are essentially custom are essentially plugins that we are bundling by itself independently. So if you look into Draggable, for example, we have our source and then we have the location of where we are bundling it. The source will be all these JS files or that we are getting from Node modules. We are bundling all this into a single file called Draggable. And if you want to have a look what that is or how that looks like, if you go to plugins, you go to Draggable, you see this bundle is the same exact file. If you open that up, it's all this, basically all the code from all these files bundled up. So again, if you want to remove any one of this, you can just delete and you're good to go. And if you want to add your own, like say you have a plugin that is going to be used for a single page for your entire project, you can just add your own plugin. Let's say new plugin again, or new custom plugin. right? And then you put your source. Because it's a custom, it's going to be deployed into a single file or a single independent file. You need to have a source, and then you need to define your bundle name. And then all you do is just follow this exact same structure. You have your styles to define your CSS, and then your script to define your JS, and then you need to define your bundle CSS and JS. And what it does is it will just, once you run Gulp, the Gulp command, it will just compile everything into wherever you defined into one of these folders. And all you do in your HTML after that is then just include it into your HTML, just like this. This to include the actual plugin bundle file, and this for your initialization JS file. So that's basically it for custom. So just to recap, let's just remove all this. Just to recap the difference between the two. Okay, so we have our base and we have custom, just to recap. So in our base, we have mandatory and optional. So if you add your own custom plugin within optional, it will be bundled up within the global, like the global plugins bundle. So this will be used on every page. So if your plugin is going to be used constantly, like say it's within the header, or say it's within the footer, or it's one of the menu items or something like that, it's being used for every page. We put it in the optional part of it. And then if it's not, say if it's only a single page plugin, like if you only need it for a single page, then you put it in custom. But in custom, you define the source and the bundle. In the global, you only need to define the sources, like where is it coming from. That's all you need to do, simply because we are defining the bundle globally at the bottom, like here. All right, so that's that for our vendors. And then comes our pages. Now our pages, if you look, we have our source. So let's look at our source. Let's minimize all this. And then we go to source. And then we go to pages. So all these files within here, which is our error pages, our login pages, and our wizard pages, are all going to be bundled up into a single, not single, they'll be all bundled up into individual CSS files. Okay, maybe I shouldn't say bundle. Technically, they're just getting output or compiled or converted from SAS into CSS. So what it does is, let's minimize this. Let's look into our CSS. You go to pages, you see the same thing here. Let's minimize this. Okay. So we have our errors, logins, and wizards under pages. So all the files within here, whoops, will get pushed, compiled, and pushed into this path. So it becomes CSS, like so. So we have our SAS files converted or compiled into CSS. And then JS, we have all of JS files, which is within our JS pages and all of this here. So if you go to our JS pages, and then you see the same structure, the CRUD custom features, builder, builder minimum, builder min. This is the minified JS of this. So all these files will get deployed into the assets folder, so that your project can use it whenever it wants. So if you want to have a new custom SAS, like say you create a new page and you want to add your own SAS for that new page, all you have to do is go to pages, maybe add a new folder, add a file in here, and that's it, because all this does is going to look for everything within the pages folder and then compile it and then deploy it into a single into a single CSS of that specific SAS file, like so. So this is the error tree CSS. So if you look into our source SAS and error tree, so basically we're getting this and making it to this. That's all what this does. And theme, this is a similar thing. So if you look at the source, where's it coming from? It's getting the theme from our source. Let's minimize this, go to themes, and all of these files within here, like in our site or brand and etc., will get deployed into that folder, which is, let's open themes, site, all that. So essentially it's just converting or compiling SAS into CSS. Now the media is a bit different because media, there's no compilation needed. All it's doing is it's going to grab all the media from the source and then deploying it into your assets. So let's minimize the CSS and this SAS minimize that. So all media, we have our backgrounds, our demos, our error pages, and everything will be deployed into our media. So the exact same folder will get pushed into the assets. Now you might ask, why are we duplicating our files? We have source already, but in our assets, why are we duplicating it? Well, that's because when you customize Metronic, you are essentially going to be working within the source folder. And when you're working within the source folder, your project is not using the source folder. Your project is actually using the assets folder. And as I mentioned earlier in this video, your assets folder gets deployed in a specific path that you can define. So if your project is sitting in, say, another folder, like say it's in your C drive or it's in your desktop or it's somewhere else, and you want all of this that you've worked on and tested on using Metronic's demos, and you want all these assets to be deployed into your projects, you just need to change this, run the Gulp command, and you have this entire assets based off whatever you just edited in your source be deployed into your project. So this is essentially the power of what Metronic build tools can do. So to make a quick demo, let's go ahead and go to demo 1 and let's delete this. Okay, and then what we do is we go into just to show you again that this folder has no longer any assets folder. So we go to tools, we run our CMD, open up the command prompt, type in gulp -- demo1, and what we're going to do here is we're going to have a look into demo1 and this, and what we do is when this is done, you'll see the assets folder pop up. Okay, it's done. As you can see, look at that, we have our assets. So now let's say in our HTML, right, let's say we have a new folder. Let's say it's new project. Okay. So what we're going to do here is we're going to change this path because we want to deploy, say the new project. This is our new project folder. So we have our HTML, our project files, our index and whatever, everything will be here. And we want to deploy all of our assets, everything that we've worked on within the source folder, like everything we worked on within here. All of this, all the SAS, all this, whatever we change, we modify, we edit, we want to push it into our new project. So what we do is we change this to, what do we call it, new project. We save our gulp. And then we run the gulp demo 1 because we are working on demo 1. As you can see, we are working on demo 1. What I mean is working demo. That means we are using demo 1's layout and assets and whatever. So do that. And as you can see, our new projects all of a sudden have a this folder, and in there we have our assets. So what we just did is we just deployed all of demo 1's assets into a new path, basically a new project path. So let's say if your project is sitting within this folder, you will basically have all of your predefined plugins, dependencies, all this customization, your source files, your JS files, the media files, all this that's already defined within Metronic source will be deployed into your project directory as you build your project. Okay, so I think that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you find this video informative. Give us a like if you did. Follow us on our social medias like Facebook and Twitter. Links will be in the description below. And also please subscribe to our YouTube channel so that when we release our next video, you get an update. I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.